وسيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فهو المهتدي ولن تجد له وليا مرشدا أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ولي الصالحين وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على خاتم الأنبياء سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته وتابعيهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I seek refuge in Allah against the accursed shaitan. I begin in the mighty name of Allah, the ever gracious, the ever merciful. All praise is due to Allah, who has guided us to Islam and to the statement of unity and sincerity, and to the deen brought to perfection and completion, courtesy our teacher Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to the ideological path of our father Ibrahim Hanifa, who was not one of the polytheists. We thank and praise Allah. We seek forgiveness of our sins from Him. We put all our trust in Him. We seek Allah's protection against the evils of our hands and our hearts. We bear witness that none deserves to be worshipped except Allah alone, the guardian of the righteous. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Allah's apostle and servant. I seek Allah's chosen blessings upon him, upon members of his worthy household, his courageous companions, and upon all those who will continue to follow their footsteps till the day of accounting. Thereafter, I extend the best courtesy by saying may Allah's peace and blessings abide with us. Good evening and welcome to Family Ta'alim tonight. We thank Allah for bringing us together again. We appreciate the gift of life, the gift of faith, security, peace of mind, good health, and happiness. All of this combined to make it easy for us to remember and to be able to make it. We welcome everybody tonight, especially Sheikh Ibrahim Usman, who is going to enrich tonight's conversation after I've tried to lay the foundation. Tonight we're going to attempt to see Islamic feminism. Like we promised, we are going to look at the issue from 3 ayahs of the Quran, 2 in Surah Al-Nisa, and the summary, the last ayah of Surah Al-An'am, Insha'Allah ta'ala. If we are revising what we have done so far, we have said that feminism is natural and Allah does not seem to oppose gender equality in certain respects. When we talk about social spiritual responsibility, Allah is neutral. There is gender neutrality, social spiritual responsibility. Allah expects men and women to be socially responsible and to be spiritually responsible. So there's gender neutrality in these two. But when we come to gender differential in roles, gender roles and responsibilities, Allah does not talk about neutrality. When we talk about gender roles, duties, and responsibilities, the weight is heavier on the man. The man is expected to be more responsible. He's expected to carry more weight. And it's also therefore responsible to take leadership roles, duties, and responsibilities. It is only in the limited sense that this duty may fall on women among themselves and in certain family issues. For example, where the first child is a female, nothing stops her from being the head of her family. She will head her siblings. She will discharge her roles and responsibilities without abdicating it to a man, a male member of the family. As for women leading men, that is a bit clumsy because there is no clear material and scriptural evidence for a female to lead male and females. We have also talked about the frequent accusation of feminism in practice, in demonstration, in attitude, and so on. When a woman is pushed to the wall and she decides to respond or react, then the man is quick to accuse her of demonstrating feminism. Sometimes a man wants to be the leader in the house. He wants to be a king to be served. He wants to be a husband to be submitted to, but he does not do what Allah wants him to do. Yet, he wants obedience, he wants submission, and so on. And they frequently cite Khadija, who submitted to the Prophet, without looking at the even social superiority of the Prophet to Khadija, not to talk of the spiritual superiority. And the fact that at the time Khadija was marrying the Prophet ﷺ, she had used her extrasensory perception to see the excellence, the uniqueness, and the distinction in the Prophet. But many men don't have all this. They don't have any of these. Yet they want their wives to behave like Khadija. Sometimes what we find is sheer envy, sometimes sheer wickedness on the part of the man. He probably went into the marriage to turn the wife into an ATM. And when the woman begins to wisen up, he begins to complain. When you expect your wife to be poor while you are rich and Allah decides otherwise, your wife becomes richer than you. Sometimes envy makes you accuse her of pride, arrogance, non-submissiveness, and so on. We have found all this. And we have said that some of the time, what men accuse women of in terms of displaying feminism, claiming rights, and so on, responses to injustice, unfair dealings, and other characteristics. But this is not to say that all women are angels. And this is not to say that men are devils. What we concluded on was that a woman has the capacity to be anything, just like a man. Her faith does not depend on her husband's faith. That's why the wives of Noah and Lut did not follow their husbands in faith, and they perished as kuffar. Similarly, the wife of Pharaoh did not follow her husband in kufru, and that's why she was killed as a mu'mina. And a young lady who had all the opportunities to misbehave, kept her chastity and had honorable mention in the Quran. What we want to also remind ourselves of before we go into the Quran tonight is the fact that most of the time, every productive driving force is muannas in the Quran and in Arabic language. So you find the heaven, the earth, Al-Jannah, hell, almost always being muannas, being feminine. And whenever Allah uses generic name, nafs, for mankind, nafs is feminine. And when he uses ruh, soul, nafsan wahida, like we are going to read shortly, it is feminine. The womb is also feminine. But interestingly, the farj, the genital, whether male or female, is masculine. And the sun, in its might and usefulness, is feminine. And alhamdulillah, the sheikh is in the house. And the qamar is either feminine or masculine. I don't have much knowledge about that. But all these are observations that we can make from the Quran. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to call attention to certain things in the ayat. Then Sheikh will take over and explain the question that will naturally arise from ayah 1 of Surah Nisa. Is Global Amira there? She was the one that asked the question last week. I didn't have any answer. I still don't have any answer. But I believe that my deficiency can be made up by the presence of the Sheikh Ibrahim Usman, who has promised to bail me out. And I think he's here. Sheikh is here. MashaAllah. So the question is, those who cannot join this WhatsApp can join YouTube. It is being streamed live. The question is, if Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nas, taku rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida, wa khalaqa minha zawjaha, wa batha minhuma rijalan kathiran wa nisaa, wa taqullaha alladhi tasaaluna bihi wal arham. Inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba. There are 5 issues in this ayah that have to do with feminism. If Allah says this, and the Prophet says that every woman, like the first woman, was created from the rib of her husband, what about women who have been more than once widowed and have remarried? What about women that have been divorced? They are children with the men they married, And when they remarry, they also have children. Whether or not they even have children, what about them? Will they have been created from several ribs of several men? This is the question. But let's get the issues out then. I hand over to Sheikh. I will take over after 9, and then we continue with Ayah 34. And then we use Ayah 165 of Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-An'am, to conclude tonight's conversation. Ayah says, "O mankind, fear your Lord, who created you from a single soul." The first feminism issue is the use of nafs. Allah says He created you from one nafs, nafsin wahid, one soul. But when He wants to describe the soul further, He brought two related issues. وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا. And literally, he created from her, a spouse. Yeah, literally, I say literally. In other words, nafs is feminine, and He created a spouse from her. Because we know that Allah is talking about Adam. But Adam, in a generic sense, the single soul from which his spouse was created. But Allah refers to him as she, her. He created from her a spouse. But the tidiest way to translate it is to say He created mankind from one soul, created its mate from it. So we use it instead of her. It is, a lot of things are masculine. The translator will not be comfortable translating one soul, the first soul, the soul of Adam, as a she. So, وَبَثَ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً. And He brought out from the two of them men and women. Now, let's say rijalan kasiro. It shouldn't be assumed that there were more men than women, because this will contradict facts. We have more women than men, but it may also be true. Scientifically too, we know that women lose more male fetuses than female. Female fetuses are stronger. So when they come to this world, male children are usually lost in greater number than female children. It is also the male children that will grow into adult and go into the military and die. So accidents and so on. A lot of factors we combine. According to Ismail, please mute now. A lot of factors we combine to make it possible and easy to lose males. So males will always be more in number. But the fact today, which cannot really be contradicted, is that more females exist. And the Prophet Islam had said what means there will be more females to pursue less men. The fourth one is that وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامَ. Fear Allah, whom you use to get your mutual right, and the wombs. And the wombs here is more meaning. In Allah kana alaykum raqiba. Surely Allah is over you, an observer. Allah surrounds you, is present with you. As in, He surrounds you He knows everything you're doing. Apart from the feminism issue in this ayah, which seems to place some kind of honor, respect, and delicacy, emphasis on the female gender, we see equality here, as we see in many places. As we are going to conclude, inshallah, that ayah we are going to use to conclude also indicates equality. It indicates equality. So we will continue from here after Sheikh Ibrahim Usman has answered the question and also provided more insight. Let me quickly read this. The number of men and women in the world is roughly equal, though men hold a slight lead with 102 men for 100 women in 2020. More precisely, out of 1,000 people, 504 are men. That is 50.4%, and 496 are women. This is statistical. So thank you very much. What Allah says is always correct. Allah is the creator, so he knows what he's saying. Whatever people say cannot contradict what Allah has said. So let's hear from Sheikh Ibrahim Usman. Prof. Fadal ya Sheikh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah wa bil alamin wa salatu wa salam ala rasulil kareem wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. There is no doubt that the Imam Emeritus, as my Egbon will always say, has raised a lot of fundamental and basic questions in respect of Ayah 1 of Surah An-Nisa and the Islamic understanding of feminism. I want to quickly say this, that in my view, for us to have an holistic understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually saying in this verse, there is a need for us to interpret this verse as a whole, these verses of the Quran as a whole. We will not be able to do justice if we take verses of the Quran in isolation. It's always good to see the Quran as an integral unit. Therefore, to understand it, we have to look at the entire message of the Quran. Secondly, especially in respect of the question that was raised, which the Imam wants me to answer, I want to say that in my humble opinion, that misreading was as a result of what I had explained in my presentation last Saturday on Mission Board in respect of the Mushkil al-Quran and Mushkil al-Hadith. That is the ambiguous in the Quran and the ambiguous in the Hadith. You see, every language has its own subtleties, and it is always important to understand this in interpretation. For instance, there are many Arabic words that are ta'anis, they are in the feminist gender, but actually, in reality, they are names of men. They are descriptions of a masculine feat, and vice versa. So the fact that a particular word is in the female gender or masculine gender may not necessarily indicate that it is actually female or masculine. And that is why there are times in the interpretation of the Quran in particular, and the hadith of the Prophet, a lot of interpreters avoid literal interpretations because those literal interpretations will not represent the exact import of the message. So that is why, for instance, it will be wrong to translate soul as used in this verse as are, because it is interpreted based on an holistic understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually talking about, which, like the Imam has said, is talking about Adam, alayhi salatu wasalam. So, and that is why people will use the masculine gender to interpret it. Finally, when Imam was translating a very relevant hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he made a translation that appears very, very strange when he said something like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a woman from her spouse. I think this is where you understand the ishkal or the ambiguity that we are talking about. If we go to Surah Rum, Ayah 21, I'm sure all of us who have been translating this verse will naturally translate it as of his signs is that he has created for you from among your spouse, from among yourself, your spouses, that is min anfusikum, from among yourself, azwaja, your spouses. I'm sure this is the way we always translate this verse. And this is where the ambiguity comes from. Yes, anfusikum is a generic word that refers usually, literally, to ourselves or yourselves, to be specific. But based on an holistic reading of verse 1 of Surah An-Nisa, the hadith the Imam mentioned, we do not translate this in line with the Sharia as yourself, because that is a misinterpretation of what Allah is talking about. There is nowhere, to the best of my knowledge, that we have been given the idea that every woman is created from her spouse. I'm not aware of any evidence for this. What I do know is that according to the Prophet ﷺ, it was only Hawa that was created from Adam. No other person was created from a man except Hawa. No other person was created from a man except Hawa. And that is why all the Mufassirun of Quran chapter 4 verse 1 have interpreted that verse with the hadith the Imam read. And what does the hadith say? The hadith, as narrated by Abu Huraira and many other companions, as contained in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, is that فَإِنَّهُنَّ is a very long hadith, and we have different riwayat of this hadith. In fact, Bukhari and Muslim have used different wordings. But according to the wording of Bukhari, the Prophet was wanted to have said, فَإِنَّهُنَّ خُلِقْنَا مِنْ دِلَعٍ, that women are created from a rib. It is understood that despite the fact that Allah, the Prophet has used the jamu, that is unna, and not fa'innaha. He has said fa'inna khuliqna min dilain. They have been created from a rib. That the Prophet was actually talking about Adam, because in other narrations he explained that it is the person created from Adam, and he made us to understand that this person was created from the rib behind Adam, alayhi salatu wasalam. So there are a lot of riwayat explaining this to show that it is referring essentially to Adam, alayhi salatu wasalam. So if, according to Ayah 1 of Surah An-Nisa, and according to the acceptable interpretation of this hadith of the Prophet, it is referring only to Adam, alayhi salatu wasalam. The question is, how do we interpret Ayah 21 of Surah An-Rum? This is the interpretation of Islamic scholars, and we can see the example in how Ibn Kathir has interpreted that ayah. He has interpreted the ayah by saying, Inna Allah khalaqa lakum min sinfikum wa jinsikum nisa'an adamiyat mislikum. Allah has created from among yourself, that yourself means min sinfikum, from a species like yourself. A species like yourself. Not that literally Allah took every woman from every man that she's going to marry, but Allah has created every woman from her own species, a human being, not from the species of the jinn, not from the species of the angel, and mislikum, exactly like yourself. So you have the same blood running in you. You have the same vein running in you. When we understand this ayah in this light, then we understand that even from creation, Allah makes it abundantly clear that men and women are equal. None is inferior to the other, because they are essentially created from the same manner, from the same way. And if we go back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, it also raises other fundamental issues. Generally, majority of Islamic scholars interpret the hadith further to show that the woman is inferior to the man. Why? Because further in the hadith, Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that the most crooked part of the rib is the upper part, which gives the impression that women are naturally crooked. They are naturally not straightened because of where they have been created from. And he ended by saying, when you make the attempt to straighten her, then you are going to break her. And that breaking, he interprets further to mean divorce. But if you leave her exactly the way she has been created, then you are going to enjoy her. So what we can take from this essentially is that the Prophet ﷺ is actually teaching men that yes, women have a lot of feminist issues, feminist concerns that men do not have. As a result of these concerns, there is always that tendency for us to want to see them as a problem, to want to see them as a challenge, to want to see them as a trouble in our life. But when we take them the way Allah has created them, when we accept them the exact way Allah has created them, it is only then we can get the best from them. And that is why he said, Faiza stamtata. If you are going to enjoy her, if she's going to take you to the peak of enjoyment, that will only happen when you accept her exactly the way Allah has created her, because Allah does not desire that she needed to change her nature in order to please you as a man. But we miss this interpretation when we talk about this hadith. So by way of trying to conclude, I want to say very clearly, without any fear of being controverted, that when we take a holistic look at the ayat of the Quran, it is difficult. Yes, there are verses in the Quran that are mushkil, that are ambiguous, that at times we want to give the impression that the woman is inferior and the man is superior. But in reality, when those ayat are taken in a holistic manner, then we will understand that there is no such thing as far as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned. He has given us various roles, not because of the superiority of one gender or the inferiority of the other gender, but because that is the only way in the wisdom of Allah that we can complement each other. And if we go back to the very beginning of Ayah 1 of Surah An-Nisa, it is significant for me that Allah, in addressing men and women, here in this verse, uses the term that we are all familiar with, Ya Ayyuhan Nas. What does that tell us? From Ya Ayyuhan Nas, there is nothing to tell us that anybody is female or anybody is male. Unlike the general notion in English language, where there is the tendency to talk of mankind, share men, and so on and so forth, as if language also gives superiority to the male folk. This is not so in this verse. Rather, Allah uses a generic term that refers to both men and women without any discrimination, because the word nurse is from nasiya, and it is both men and women that forget. It is both men because they are created from the same root. So essentially, their nature is basically the same as far as Allah is concerned. And that is why Allah goes to this root to tell us that the two of you are human beings. You share the same qualities. You forget. You disobey Allah. You misbehave. The two of you. So he's talking about anasu, both man and woman. And the correct interpretation will not be mankind. It will rather be people, all people, and not all mankind from the Islamic perspective. So as a whole, we understand from Ayah Nisa and Ayah of Rum and the Hadith of Prophet that it was only Hawa from the Islamic perspective that was created from a man, and that was Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. No other woman was created from another man as far as the Islamic concept of creation is concerned. And that is why we are basically equal, because both man and woman, like Allah said in the next statement in Surah An-Nisa, وَبَصَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً. Every other human being is from the two of them. So every other human being to that extent is equal, because you all came directly without any intermediary, without any barrier. You both came from the same parents. You have universal parents. And this in Islam is not only restricted to how we should understand gender from a Muslim lens, but rather it extends to how we should understand the human race from the Islamic perspective. That as far as Islam is concerned, whether you are a Muslim, whether you are a Christian, whether you are a Jew, whether you are a Catholic, you are all human beings. You are all equal before Allah to that extent. Yes, faith will become a signifier, but faith is only a signifier, and this is what we continue to make, a mistake we continue to make. Faith is only a signifier from the Islamic perspective in that life, before Allah, not before us. Allah has not asked us to use faith as a dividing marker. The same way He doesn't want us to use gender as a dividing marker. And that is why it is very clear. Allah did not say He has honored the believers among human beings. His honor is bestowed on anybody who is a human being. You only needed to be a human being for you to be a special creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regardless of your gender, regardless of your religion, regardless of your race. So this is what we understand from an holistic interpretation of the Quran. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Salaam alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sheikh, Jazakallah khairan. I think this conversation must continue because we have not gone to Ayah 34, and alhamdulillah, you went to Ayah 21 of Surah to Rum. Bro, before you go, we have to answer a few questions from people, maybe just two, but I want us to look at what is already complicating the question. I couldn't find Global Amira who raised the question. It was she who cited the hadith that women were created from the rib of their husbands. I'm not the one. She was the one. However, when you started explaining it, the hadith, I noticed as a linguist, the use of jam'u, like you said, the use of plural, just like the use of plural in Ayah 21 of Surah Rum. You may need to shed more light on this. Allah deliberately uses plural. Allah's messenger also deliberately used plural for the issue of women being ribs, being crooked. The most crooked of it is where she was created. You straighten it, you try to straighten it, you divorce her, you leave her like that, and so on. Why was the Prophet addressing us with an issue that concerned only Adam and Hawa? Is an intellectual concern. According to your explanation, the Prophet ﷺ went further to say the most crooked is the upper part or the short one. If you leave her, is still referring to our wives as ribs. Forget about whether they are our ribs. What it is, they are ribs. That's a differential. And we are not going to talk about superiority or inferiority. You may need to come back next week. We take off again from here. That is my own observation. I have no question. But I've seen
Let me quickly respond to that, sir.
Okay.
As I did say at the beginning, to have a comprehensive understanding of what I've just presented, anybody who did not listen to my talk last Saturday should go back. The point is very straightforward, very simple. What we have in Surah An-Nisa and the riwayah of Bukhari is generic. It's talking in the plural. But we have other texts in the singular. According to Sahih Muslim, what you have is Innal Maraha Khulqat min Dilain. A woman, it is not in the plural. This is what you have in the text. So ordinarily, a person will want to say these texts are contradictory. The same way what you have in Ayah 1 of Surah An-Nisa is in the singular. It is not in the plural. So you want to say there is a contradiction between this and what you have in Ayah of Rome. But the major principle that have come to adopt in the interpretation of the Mushkil al-Quran and the Mushkil al-Hadith, which was a principle introduced by the Shafi'i school of thought, is taqasisul amr. When you have two texts that appear to be contradictory, then you use the one that is restrictive. You use the one that is specific to interpret the generic. And I did give the foundation that this was how Muhammad Sallallahu himself interpreted what was alleged to be contradictory in his lifetime. He used the muqayyad or the horse to explain the mutlaq or the arm. He used the specific to explain the generic. And I said in that lecture that in explaining that, he interpreted the generic metaphorically. And this is exactly what Ibn Kathir has done here. That linguistically, literally, anfusikum means yourself. But it has been interpreted as your species, which is not the literal meaning. Why is it interpreted in that manner? Because there is a specific text that tells us that it is singular. Both the Quran and in the Hadith, we have specific texts. So we use the specific to understand the generic. I laid that foundation. And in my view, I have to say this very categorically. This is a subject on which I've been teaching and researching for almost 2 decades. This is a subject on which I've been teaching and I've been researching. In my graduate class on Hadith, I only teach the Hadith allati fiha ishkal. I only teach traditions in my class that are ambiguous. This is what we have been studying, we have been discussing, we have been analyzing. So our understanding is that when you use the method of the Prophet himself in answering the companions who challenge him, why are these texts contradictory? And the method he used was to use the specific to understand the generic. When you use that method, then you get the exact message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what I've done. We have specific tests in the Hadith. We have in the Quran. We have generic tests. So we use the specific to understand the generic. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Thank you very much. May Allah preserve you on Khairat. 2 statements before you go. Number 1, I'm inviting everybody to join him on Saturday as he continues this wonderful conversation on apparent ambiguity in the Quran. The link will be sent in the chat room, so you can join us 4:20 after Asri on Saturday. He will continue the conversation. The way things are, it may not be, I don't think we will release him even next week. He may have to come back for more than 3 parts. The second comment before we allow these people that are raising hands is that you also said concerning honor that what you need is to be ayah 70 of Surah Isra. But we also read in Surah Al-Hujurat that inna khalaqnakum min dhakar wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. I think you should also take note of this ayah. With nations and tribes for identification, to know yourself. Those who have honor in the sight of Allah are those who have taqwa. Meaning that taqwa is also a criterion for honor with Allah. It is no longer, if we take this ayah and match it with ayah 7 of Surah Israel, it is not just being a human being. Allah honored human beings, but to have honor in the sight of Allah, you need taqwa, apart from being human beings. Allah created us, fi asam takwim, the best. ثم رددناه أسفل السافلين, and it reduces us to the lowest of the low. And every human being that has that best form of creation will remain low. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات, except those who have faith and are righteous. So being the best, being the lowest is also countered by faith and righteousness. I think the Sheikh will need to take note of all this as we meet, inshallah, on Saturday. If you're still around, you can quickly answer the question or concerns of Ms. Rahima and Komor Shurende. Ms. Rahima?
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if I'm on mute. Okay, thank you for a very wonderful lecture. May Allah reward both sheikhs and increase you in ilm. Okay, so I just have very simple questions. The first one is about the men ego, because I think for me, there are things that we're being told that I think it's cultural, but it's been termed to be religious. So there's just two I'm going to give an example of, and then I want to be sure if it's from the Islamic perspective, because the men's ego, for example, women are always told that, men have very huge ego, and that we have to, for lack of a better word, massage the ego, even when it is obvious that the woman is being chanced. And I used to wonder, because I'm like, I don't think, from my little knowledge, I don't think I've ever come across any idea where the Prophet always talks about men's ego, and, the woman has to lose herself just because she wants to appease her husband's ego. I think Islam is always more about humility, for the men to be humble as well, to serve the family, to put the happiness of their family first. But most especially from the Yoruba perspective, it's always more about, the husband's ego has to be balmed, has to be massaged. You have to, lose yourself basically just because you want to please your husband. And I think these are the things that brought about this feminism of the thing, which is what is going to bring me to my second question. I just want clarification on the things I've actually mentioned. So I don't know if I'd missed anything, so I would like to apologize for that. But I wanted to ask, can we get like a comprehensive definition of what feminism is, or what we think feminism is? Because these days, all we hear is, oh, feminism. And like you said earlier on in the lecture that, sometimes a woman is being pushed to the wall, and then when she turns back and she reacts, it's always coined on, oh, feminism. I mean, I've had that as well when I'm very staunch in some of my opinions, and, I'm being told by the opposite gender that, oh, feminist. And there's one thing I usually tell them. I say that if what I'm saying, or if this, what I believe in, if this is what you term as feminism, then it means the feminists are doing something right. That's what I respond with. So maybe if we could get a comprehensive definition of what feminism is, maybe we might avoid mixing this thing up. And because some men actually expect, I mean, yes, Allah says be submissive to your husband. And this is why I tell people as well. It says be submissive to your husband. It doesn't say be submissive to every man. Like, so, sometimes a woman is having like an argument with the opposite gender, and maybe she's trying to prove her point, and the next thing is that look on me, can you not respect me? Like, if she has to respect her husband, did Allah say we need to respect like all men? Do women have to like not be themselves or not have an opinion just because the other person is a man? And then the third one is marriage as well. So what we know Islam says is for tranquility, reproduction. Not even, I think the basic reason for marriage is tranquility, from my little knowledge. But we're always told, oh, it's It's all about strife, suffering, blah, blah, blah. If you've not gone through all of this, you're not married and everything. So I just want to know if that is also an Islamic perspective, like if marriage is supposed to be all about challenges and achieve and the way they actually make it out to seem in the Yoruba and the African culture and perspective. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think the Sheikh will have to say something. I'm sorry, we will not be able to take more because we don't have the time. But this is the third part of this conversation. We have explained feminism. We gave detailed definition, we gave types. Yeah, last week we even traced the origin. We traced the origin of feminism. So what we know is that most of the things they call feminism today, feminism itself is a reaction. It's a reaction. And it started developing after the First and Second World War. And it's a reaction to unfair treatment of women. But as for Islam, yes, a lot of times, I think the Sheikh will have to come to my rescue here. A lot of times, things that are not Islamic are being pushed, smuggled into Islam because they think that there is nothing wrong in our culture. Most of these things are cultural, they are not really Islamic. And before the Sheikh comes in, I want to assure you that marriage in Islam is not all about suffering. It's not all about suffering. However, there is no feminism in not respecting people generally, whether they are male or female. So it is not feminism when somebody is rude. If somebody is rude, is rude. And it doesn't have to be because he or she wants to prove a point. There is no rudeness. There's no room for rudeness in Islam. However, I know that a lot of things are attributed to Islam, which are basically culture. And we have a long way to go. So, Sheikh, let us address Ms. Rahima. I'm sorry, that name says one can, and then we can go.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So let me quickly say this, then I can take my leave, sir.
Yeah.
Number one, as the Imam has said, there are different categories of feminism. And from my research, what I've discovered, which I've been teaching, is that Islam is totally in support of what is known as equity feminism. When feminism started in Europe in the 18th century, it started specifically to fight for certain basic rights for women, the rights of literacy, which women never had before then, the right to work, and the right to equal pay with a man. This was essentially the pillars on which feminism rested at that point in time. Before you had radical feminism, Marxist feminism, if you read this book, Who Stole Feminism, you see how the founders of feminism actually regretted, because they discovered that certain women had hijacked their movement. And these were those who brought radicalism, hatred of men into the feminist movement, and they see everything in the society as patriarchal, which is not always correct. I will cite an example. A lot of people who are Muslim feminists have argued that even the Islamic law is patriarchal. But this is unfortunate because it shows their lack of understanding of the evolution of Islamic law. There is hardly any position as far as Islamic law is concerned today, where women were not involved in the evolution. Whether you are talking of fiqh, or you are talking of tawhid, or you are talking of, just mention it. Women were involved from the beginning to the end. And scholars will always cite either Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, Salama, and a host of other Muslim women in reaching any conclusion. The same way they cite Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So women played critical role in the codification of the Islamic law. So you cannot say everything is patriarchal. So Islam is not anti-feminism that is interested in redressing the oppression of women. And I do say categorically that women have been oppressed in every society, in Muslim society, in non-Muslim societies. And that is why I always tell us to go back to Quran chapter 3, verse 195, Quran chapter Surah Al-Azab, verse 35, and many other verses of the Quran. They were revealed because women challenged the inhuman treatment of women in Arabian society. Muslim women came forward to challenge certain things that were perceived as repressing women. And Allah came to their rescue to tell them that as far as this religion is concerned, this religion is not about repressing women. So they started the fight right in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. A lot of Muslim women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ took up Umar ibn Khattab on many issues because they felt he was very extremist on certain issues, including issues that affected women. They took him up, and the Prophet ﷺ had to intervene on many occasions. And that brings me to the first point you raised, the issue of ego. I think it's very clear to every one of us that when you talk about ego, ujbu, or you talk about kibul, pride, it is forbidden. And it destroys the work of any Muslim, whether you are a man or you are a woman. And we have to get it. The fact that Islam has made the man the head of the family, does not mean that Islam is asking women to massage the ego of men. And that is why you have the limit. Yes, in Islam, a woman is required to obey the husband. The husband is our door to Al-Jannah, as far as Islam is concerned. Yet, there is a principle. La ta'ata li-makhluq fi ma'siyati al-khaliq. You cannot obey your husband and disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why, as a Muslim woman, you also need to teach yourself Islam. You also need to become versant with Islam. When Umar ibn Khattab, I told you, was very, very tough. He never wanted his own wife to come to the masjid of the Prophet to pray. He did not like it. He hated it. But the wife asked him, is it forbidden in Islam? He said it is not forbidden. She said, I will go to the mosque. You cannot stop me. So there is always a red flag that guarantees the rights and privileges of Muslim women. So that is why we have check and balances. That is why women reported their husband to the Prophet ﷺ when their rights are abused. And till today, a Muslim woman is allowed to take her case to the Sharia court to fight for her rights. And according to all Muslim scholars, where you do not have Sharia courts, you can make use of secular courts. It is only when you have a Sharia court that is the ideal as far as Islam is concerned. So Islam does not expect that men should be deified, such that whatever they say is law. No, it is law to a limit, as long as it is not null and void, as long as it does not contravene the clear rights that Allah and His Messenger have given to women. So I think we have to really understand this point very well. On marriage, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to be very frank. Basically, like I said elsewhere this last Saturday, basically, marriage in Islam is meant to be the basis of societal formation. The kind of peace that Islam expects to exist in the society, Islam wants Muslims to make their marriages, their homes, that basis. That is part of the interpretation of Ayah 21 of Surah Litaskunu ilayha. Make your home a place where all the parties will be secure, where all the parties will be at home. It is a place they always want to return to, because no matter what they face in the society, when they get home, they get tranquility, they get peace of mind. That is essentially what marriage is meant to be in Islam. So if our marriage is not that, then something is wrong with our conception of Islamic marriage, as far as my knowledge can carry me. And I think in this respect, both those of us who are Muslim men and you who are Muslim women need a lot to learn. Because what we only do in life is to reproduce the training we have undergone. We have all seen how our parents lived, how mothers and fathers related in the home. And that is what a lot of us are just reproducing. We are not really learned in what is expected of us as Muslim husbands and Muslim wives. And I think this is the root of most of the challenges we find in marriage. Wallahu ta'ala ala. So I take my leave, sir.
Sorry, can I just chip in to say Jazakumullah khairan for the response? It was very, very comprehensive. Thank you very much. May Allah increase you in knowledge, both of the sheikhs. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sheikh, everybody is going. I once again thank you very much. I thank everybody. I invite everybody to join us. The link is on the chat room, so you can join us on Saturday. The Sheikh is on ground, and it's it's not likely to finish. Like he said, this is his present concern, and so he's at home. I'm sorry, Komodin Shodainde. We continue this conversation next week. We are going to Surah An-Nisa, Ayah 34, and we are going to conclude, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Some people want the recorded clip.
Yeah, it will be available, inshallah.
And the recorded clip of the last Saturday.
The two will be available, inshallah.
Some people don't belong to the DFN platform. How would they get it?
You can just drop your number on the chat room before we close. Somebody will pick it and send it to you.
Okay.
Or those who invited them can also send it to them.
Okay. For a fee, not free.
Sulaiman.
Okay. Yeah. So,
can we close?
Please
No,
close.
some people are dropping their numbers. Please pick the numbers, oh.
National coordinator, please close for us.
Please pick the numbers before you close, oh.
I am not where I can pick any number tonight. Oh. Hello, sir.
On the chat room.
Please, we have a standing approach for adding people. We have an administrator from each axis or states. Easier for them. Please contact them. Okay, sir. Okay. Who is national coordinator? Imagine to close for us. Oh.
I hope they pick the numbers before they close. Oh. I will send it to. But DFN gone. We cannot even send chats to DFN now.
I'll put them.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Oh, yes. The national coordinator, let's go and sleep. Oh.
National coordinator is Jakuru.
National coordinator is no more. It's not. It's the web that is here.
Talk about the national coordinator. We are not closer.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أنا أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين أجيريو
آمين àsìkò ọ̀rọ̀ bàbá aláṣìṣe o ẹni wọn dà
àmín ẹ ṣeun ó ti ẹ̀jẹ̀ pàwọ́ wà lábùjá
àmín o.
Very close.